Jung said something that's going to really mess with your head. He said that individuation doesn't isolate you, it connects you. He explicitly stated that the process of becoming who you truly are should bring more relationships, deeper connection, more belonging. But then why does every person who awakens end up disappearing? Why does everyone who starts to really find themselves feel this uncontrollable need to vanish from society? Why are you here, watching this at 2 a.m., knowing exactly what I'm talking about? The answer to this has been buried for over a century. And when Dr. Emily Carter from the Salk Institute scanned the brains of people in isolation in 2024, she discovered something that explains the paradox that Jung himself never quite solved. She found that the same brain regions that respond to food cravings respond to the hunger for social connection. The substantia nigra and ventral tegmental area light up the same way when you're deprived of food and when you're deprived of people. Your brain treats loneliness like starvation. But here's the problem. Awakened people aren't running away from connection. They're running from something that feels like connection, but is actually killing them from the inside out. And Jung knew this, he mapped it out. And Stanford is now proving that he was right about every detail. Hold on to that information because it's going to make sense shortly. When we're done here, you're going to understand exactly why disappearing isn't running away. It's the only way to finally arrive. Jung defined individuation as the development of the psychological individual, as a being distinct from the general, and collective psychology. It's the process of bringing the personal and collective unconscious to consciousness. 2. So be assimilated into the whole personality. Seems simple, seems healthy, seems like something that should make you more sociable, more integrated, more present. But Jung hid something crucial in his writings. He said that the person who starts the path of individuation needs to differentiate themselves from smaller groups, from the family, from circles of friends, from ethnic and social collectives. He said this because individuation requires abandoning the social mask, which is that whole set of social expectations and inauthentic roles that you've unconsciously acquired throughout life. You can't become who you are while you're still wearing the mask that others expect you to wear, and the only way to take off that mask is to step away from those who know you with it. This seems like a contradiction to what I said before. Jung said individuation connects, but he also said you need to separate. So what's the truth? The truth is, Jung was talking about two completely different types of connection, and here's where Andrew Huberman's neuroscience comes in and proves that Jung was decades ahead of science. Dr. Emily Carter discovered in February of 2024 that there's no substitute for genuine, in-person connection. She said that interactions on social media can actually create more hunger for social interaction and make you even more lonely. The brain knows the difference. Your nervous system knows when you're with people but not truly connected. And here's what no one talks about. Awakened people aren't disappearing from connection. They're disappearing from interactions that seem like connection, but are actually social performance. They're running from relationships where they need to keep the social mask activated all the time. They're stepping away from groups where every conversation is superficial. Every interaction is based on social roles. Every moment requires you to be who? Others. Expect. The brain of a person in the process of individuation is literally reconfiguring itself. And that reconfiguration is incompatible with environments that demand constant performance. Hold on, because what's coming next is where Jung was most right and where science took the longest to prove him right. In 2024 and 2025, researchers published groundbreaking studies about what happens in the brain during intense spiritual experiences. What they discovered was that 3 neural networks are fundamental to understanding this phenomenon. The default mode network, the frontoparietal network, and the salience network. These 3 networks work together in ways that completely change when consciousness expands. The parietal lobe, which is responsible for spatial awareness, and the sense of self becomes less active during intense spiritual experiences. This contributes to sensations of unity, of connection to something larger, of dissolving the boundaries between you and the world. But that same deactivation makes it impossible to keep the social mask activated. You can't simultaneously experience expanded consciousness and keep the social mask functioning. The brain simply can't do both at the same time. It's like trying to breathe and hold your breath simultaneously. They're mutually exclusive processes. And there's more. The researchers discovered something called transient hypofrontality. During altered states of consciousness, including deep meditation and mystical experiences, the prefrontal cortex, which is the region responsible for social control, for inhibiting behaviors, for maintaining the social mask, that region becomes temporarily dysregulated. Think about it. The same area of the brain that allows you to keep the social mask functioning is the same area that deactivates during experiences of expanded consciousness. It's not a coincidence. It's fundamental neurological architecture. Jung mapped this out 100 years ago without neuroimaging technology. He called it confrontation with the unconscious. Science now calls it transient dysregulation of the prefrontal cortex. It's the same thing described in different languages, separated by a century. And here's the detail that changes everything. Jung described 4 alchemical phases in psychological transformation. The first is nigredo, the blackening, where the ego begins to die. The second is albedo, the whitening, which involves withdrawal from the world and intense reflection on the direction and purpose of life. The third is citrinitas, the yellowing, where higher consciousness begins to emerge. And the fourth is rubedo, the reddening, the union of opposites, and complete rebirth. Jung wasn't just being poetic. He was describing a neurobiological process that modern science now confirms, step by step. What awakened people call the need to disappear corresponds exactly to the albedo phase. It's the necessary withdrawal, so that intense reflection can happen. The problem is where many people get stuck in this phase without knowing that there are 2 more after it. Hold on to that, because it's going to connect with what's coming next. Jung went through this personally. After the split with Freud in 1913, he entered an intense period that lasted until 1919. 6 years of confrontation with the unconscious. He isolated himself. He dove into the depths of his own psyche. He documented everything. So that is what we now know as the Red Book. And it was from this period that his most important theories about individuation, shadow, and psychological rebirth emerged. He wasn't running away. He was going through the process that he mapped out for all of us. But here's the crucial detail that few realize. Jung came back after 6 years. He returned to society, transformed. He built deep relationships. He formed a community of equally transformed people. He connected in ways that were only possible because he went through the process of differentiation first. This brings us to the apparent contradiction that needs to be resolved. Jung explicitly said that you can never arrive at yourself by building a meditation hut on top of Mount Everest. He said that you will only be visited by your own ghosts, and that this is not individuation, because you will be alone with yourself, and the self does not exist that way. He said that individuation is only possible with people, through people. This seems like a total contradiction. First, he says that you need to separate. Then he says that you need people. What did he really mean? What he meant is that there are 2 distinct phases, and science now confirms that both are neurologically necessary. The first phase is separation. It's the stepping away from the groups that know you by your social mask. It's the withdrawal from interactions that demand constant performance. It's the period of nigredo where you reflect intensely on who you really are, without the mask. But this phase has a specific purpose. It's not to run away permanently. It's to create space, so that neural reorganization can happen without constant external interference. Andrew Huberman explains that neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, requires urgency, focus, and adequate sleep. He calls this self-directed adaptive plasticity. And this plasticity happens much more efficiently when you're not constantly activating the same social circuits as always, when you're with the same people, playing the same roles, in familiar environments, your brain goes into autopilot. The same circuits are activated repeatedly. The same responses are triggered. You're not creating new neural pathways because you're stuck in the old ones. Strategic isolation disrupts this cycle. It forces the brain to process without the usual triggers. It creates the space necessary for new patterns to form. But here's what Jung understood, and what few comprehend. The second phase is return, and the return needs to happen. Without the return, the isolation becomes pathological, not transformative. Jung warned about this repeatedly. He said that the hermit on top of the mountain is not individuating. He's running away. The difference between transformation and escape is that transformation includes return. Transformation is temporary by design. Escape is permanent by fear. And here's where awakened people commit the most devastating mistake of all. They experience the relief of initial isolation. They feel the peace of finally being able to exist without performance. They discover mental clarity that they never had, surrounded by constant social demands, and they confuse temporary relief with the final destination. Isolation should be a phase. They transform it into an identity. And the brain, which needed this pause to reorganize, begins to suffer the consequences of prolonged isolation. That was never supposed to be permanent. Dr. Emily Carter discovered that we have specific neurons for loneliness in the dorsal raphe nucleus. She discovered that the brain treats prolonged social isolation as a form of deprivation, similar to hunger. Dopamine in these circuits becomes aversive. The system begins to generate increasing discomfort as a way to push you back into connection. In a 2020 study conducted in collaboration with Rebecca Sachs at Stanford, 40 participants spent an entire day in complete isolation and were then subjected to functional magnetic resonance imaging. The results were impressive. The images of food and socialization activated exactly the same areas of the brain, specifically the substantia nigra pars compacta and the ventral tegmental area. Your brain literally processes hunger for connection, the same way it processes hunger for food. It's not a metaphor, it's neurobiology. But awakened people often misinterpret this discomfort. They think it's just another sign that the world out there is incompatible with who they've become. They interpret the brain's alarm as confirmation that they should isolate themselves even further. And so, the cycle perpetuates. Isolation generates discomfort. Discomfort is interpreted as confirmation of incompatibility. Perceived incompatibility justifies more isolation. Jung mapped this out 100 years ago. He called it ego inflation. When a person identifies too much with the process of individuation, they begin to see themselves as too special for the common world. They confuse healthy differentiation with pathological superiority. And neuroscience now shows that this has specific cerebral correlates. The default mode network, which processes self-reflection and personal narrative, can become hyperactive during prolonged isolation. The person gets stuck in loops of thought about themselves, about their journey, about their uniqueness, and the more they think about it, the more convinced they become that they're too different to return. Researchers from the UK Biobank analyzed data from more than 40,000 people and discovered that chronic isolation is associated with significant changes in the structure and connectivity of the default mode network. The brain literally reorganizes itself in ways that make social reconnection increasingly difficult. This is not illumination. It's neurological trap. But here's the part that no one tells you. The paradox that Jung revealed and that Huberman now validates. True differentiation, the one that individuation demands, does not separate you from humanity. It connects you more deeply. Because when you remove the social mask, when you abandon the inauthentic roles, what remains is capable of genuine connection. For the first time, The social mask connects superficially with other social masks. It's mask talking to mask. It's performance meeting performance. It looks like connection, but it's social theater. The self, the one that emerges after the social mask is dissolved, connects in a completely different way. It connects for real. It connects with depth. It connects in ways that the social mask could never. Jung used the term imago to describe the internal representations that we have of people. When you're operating through the social mask, you don't see people for real. You see your projections onto them. You interact with your expectations, not with their reality. Carl Jung dropped a huge bombshell, something that might really mess with your head. He said individuation doesn't isolate you, it connects you. He explicitly stated that becoming your true self should bring more relationships, deeper connections, a stronger sense of belonging. But then, why do so many people who wake up end up vanishing? Why does finding yourself often feel like an uncontrollable urge to disappear from society? Why are you here, watching this at 2 a.m., knowing exactly what I'm talking about? And here's the thing. When your social mask dissolves, projections start to recede, and for the first time you can see people as they really are. This allows connection on a level that just wasn't possible before. And here's the brutal irony that awakened people often miss. They disappear because they couldn't stand superficial connections anymore, but by vanishing permanently, they deprive themselves of the deep connections that would finally be possible. Isolation should prepare you for transformed reconnection, not replace connection indefinitely. Jung knew this. He came back. After his period of intense confrontation with the personal and collective unconscious, he returned. He built deep relationships with people like Marie-Louise von Franz and Barbara Hanna. He formed a community around the Jung Institute. He connected in ways that were only possible because he went through the process of differentiation. First, he didn't stay in the cave. The cave was a passage, not a destination. Modern academia keeps Jung and Andrew Huberman artificially separated. Psychology departments don't talk to neuroscience departments. The wisdom from 100 years ago is treated as outdated mysticism. While modern science rediscovers the same truths in different language, but when you connect the two, the map becomes clear. Jung said that individuation is a process of bringing the personal and collective unconscious to consciousness. Neuroscience now shows that this corresponds to specific changes in default mode network activity and in the connectivity between brain regions. Jung said that confronting the shadow is necessary for integration. Neuroscience now shows that this involves processes in the anterior cingulate cortex and the amygdala, which allow for re-evaluation of automatic emotional patterns. Jung said that the self emerges as the center of the integrated personality. Neuroscience now identifies patterns of brain activity associated with states of coherence and integration that correspond to what Jung described, and Jung said that individuation requires temporary isolation followed by transformed reconnection. Neuroscience now shows exactly why both phases are neurologically necessary. Isolation allows new patterns to form without interference from the usual triggers. Reconnection allows those new patterns to be tested, strengthened, and consolidated. In a real social context, without isolation, you can't form new patterns because you're trapped in the old ones. Without reconnection, the new patterns remain fragile and don't integrate into real life. And here's the protocol that ties it all together. What Jung mapped psychologically and what Huberman validates neurologically. First, you need to recognize which phase you're in. If you're feeling the need to disappear, that may be the legitimate beginning of the albedo phase. It's not wrong to feel that. It's part of the process. But you need to know that it's a phase, not a permanent state. Albedo is followed by citrinitas and then rubedo. Getting stuck in albedo means never completing the transformation. Second, you need to establish structured isolation, not chaotic escape. This means defined periods of withdrawal with a specific purpose. It's not disappearing without a plan to return. It's creating space for intense reflection, knowing that this space is temporary by design. Jung took 6 years. You might need less or more. But you need to be clear that it's a period, not a destination. Third, you need to use isolation for real confrontation, not for comfortable rumination. The albedo phase is for reflecting on direction and purpose. It's not about dwelling on how different you are and how the world doesn't understand you. If your isolation is fueling narratives of superiority, you're on the wrong path. A hyperactive default mode network is a warning sign, not progress. Fourth, you need to maintain at least one anchor connection during the process. Jung said that individuation is only possible with people, through people. Even in the phase of greatest withdrawal, maintain at least one relationship that doesn't require a social mask. One person with whom you can be true. This prevents ego inflation and keeps you connected to humanity while you transform. Jung had Tony Wolfe during his most intense period of confrontation with the personal and collective unconscious. Having an anchor connection isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Fifth, you need to establish return criteria. How will you know when the isolation phase has served its purpose? What signs indicate that it's time to reconnect? Without defined criteria, isolation extends indefinitely because it always seems safer to stay than to face the transformed world. Criteria might include when you can think about your past life without intense emotional reactivity, when you feel genuine curiosity about reconnection instead of fear, when loneliness starts to feel like deprivation instead of relief. Sixth, you need to understand that the return will be uncomfortable. You've changed. The others haven't changed with you. The old dynamics won't work. And this incompatibility is not a signal to return to isolation. It's a signal that you need to find new connections or rebuild the old ones on completely different foundations. Huberman talks about this in the context of neuroplasticity. The new circuits you formed during isolation need to be tested and strengthened in a real social context. If you only form new patterns and never practice them in genuine interaction, they remain fragile and easily revert. The return consolidates the transformation in a way that isolation alone never could. Seventh, you need to accept that connection, post-individuation, is different, but not impossible. You won't be able to do social theater anymore. You won't be able to endure superficial conversations for hours, but you'll discover that there are people out there who can't stand it either, and with them, the connection that forms is deeper than anything you experienced before the transformation. Eighth, you need to practice what Huberman calls self-directed adaptive plasticity in a social context. This means deliberately exposing yourself to challenging social situations with the conscious intention of forming new response patterns. It's not going back to the same social performance as before. It's entering interactions with the social mask dissolved and allowing new patterns to emerge organically. Jung said that when you navigate the depths of your inner world, confront your shadows, and abandon old limiting patterns, a new self can emerge. This rebirth involves consciously integrating your experiences, both light and dark, into a more whole and authentic self. A person who has gone through this process often looks at life with a completely fresh perspective, finding new meaning and purpose where they once saw only emptiness. And that new meaning and purpose includes connection, not despite the transformation has, but because of it. The real reason why awakened people disappear isn't that they're incompatible with society. It's that the society they knew was based on social mask speaking to social mask. And when the social mask dissolves, that specific society ceases to make sense. But there's another society possible. One based on authenticity. One where transformed people find other transformed people. One where connection happens at the level of the self, not at the level of the mask. And you don't find that society by running away permanently. You find it by returning, as someone different. Dr. Emily Carter discovered that genuine social connection is a biological need, as fundamental as food. The brain needs it to function optimally. Prolonged deprivation causes real deterioration in essential circuits. Recent studies show that chronic isolation can cause measurable cognitive decline and structural alterations in the brain. But she also discovered that not just any connection will satisfy. Superficial connections can increase the hunger, instead of satisfying it. The brain knows the difference between social performance and genuine connection. So the answer isn't to accept any connection available. It's also not to reject every connection possible. The answer is to transform first, so that you can form connections that really nourish, and that requires going through the phase of isolation. But it also requires coming out of it. If you're watching this at 2 in the morning, knowing exactly what I'm talking about, you're probably at some point in this process. Maybe you're at the beginning, feeling the need to vanish. Maybe you're in the middle, already isolated and wondering if you should return. Maybe you're stuck, having transformed the passage into a permanent dwelling. Wherever you are, understand this: the process is real. The need for isolation is legitimate, but the destination includes return. Nigredo, albedo, citrinitas, rubedo. 4 phases, not 2. You can't stop in the middle and call it complete transformation. Jung mapped the path more than 100 years ago. The neuroscience of Huberman now confirms every detail. Differentiation happens in isolation. Integration happens in the return. You don't have to choose between being who you are or in being connected. You need to become who you are. To be able to be truly connected, that's the paradox that Jung revealed. Individuation doesn't isolate, it connects. But first, you need to separate from everything that wasn't real connection to discover what real connection means. In the last few minutes, you've discovered something that academia separates artificially. You saw how Jung mapped a process that neuroscience took a century to validate. You understood why awakened people disappear and why some never return when they should. This kind of synthesis doesn't exist anywhere else, connecting deep psychology with modern neuroscience, revealing what both know, but that no one combines. That's work that few do, because it requires mastering 2 fields that academia keeps artificially separated. If this resonated with you, if you felt that finally someone explained what you're experiencing, consider supporting this work through super thanks. It's not just financial support. It's you saying, continue revealing these connections. Continue bringing to the surface what's buried between disciplines. Continue building the bridge that academia refuses to build. Every time you click the golden heart, you finance the next revelation. You allow me to dedicate more time to this research, instead of creating superficial content that the algorithm prefers. You become part of the group. That's reconnecting ancient wisdom with modern science. In the comments, tell me, are you in the isolation phase now? Or have you already passed through it and returned? What made you disappear? And what made you return? Or are you stuck in the albedo? Not knowing how to advance to citrinitas, your story might be exactly what someone else needed to hear, to understand that they're not alone in this process. And, ironically, that's real connection, authentic people sharing true experiences. Exactly the type of connection that individuation makes possible. Jung drew the map. Huberman is translating it into the language of the brain. And you are living the journey. The only question is, are you going to transform the passage into a dwelling? Or are you going to use isolation as what it always should be? Preparation for transformed reconnection. The answer is in you. And now, you have the complete map to find it.